what are your local experts telling you is happening on the ground? I mean, we've seen a 15% increase in the amount of stock on the market, which last time we spoke, there was a shortage of stock and choice, and it was meaning people having to pay a lot more money for their houses because they had such competition.
Top tips for renters.
Wow, this is an interesting one.
I'm committed to supporting you and helping you with your property-related questions via our valuable content. There's always a lot to cover, but it is only with your support that we at Move IQ can make it happen, and we really believe that we can. So if you find our content useful and valuable, then please do hit the subscribe button, become part of our community, and we'll keep doing what we do. Meanwhile, on with the interview. Nathan, you're back in the hot seat, my friend. Just where I like you.
I don't feel in the wall.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? And our audience at Move IQ, they're quite informed, but there's a lot of housing market indices out there, and you and I know how polarized the market is, and it's probably more polarized now than it has been for a long time. But you've got a huge network of people out on the ground. What are they telling you at the moment? What's going on?
So they're telling us actually on the coal face, and probably for the listener and the viewer, the important thing, a lot of the indices or statistics out there are based on housing completions, which obviously will be several months after property sales have been agreed. So there's a lag. And the beauty we have is we have on-the-ground insights to actually what's happening on the coal face
right now,
day to day right now.
Yes.
And the good news is a lot of activity is happening at the moment. So we're seeing an increase in buyers. There's about 11-12% increase in buyers from this time last year. We've seen a 15% increase in the amount of stock on the market, which a lot of time, last time we spoke, there was a shortage of stock and choice, and it was meaning people having to pay a lot more money for their houses because they had such competition. The good news is the amount of stock available is increasing. And the other good news is the number of property sales being agreed again compared to the same time last year has increased, and we're sat at around about a 15 to 20% increase in that. So all of those metrics look very, very positive despite all the angst and turmoil that's out there.
So that's year on year. How does it compare with perhaps sort of last quarter of last year, sort of October, November?
So yeah, October, November is always a traditionally busy time, and I think the good thing for us is that has continued through.
Is it?
You know,
That's a bit of a surprise.
Very much so.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you know how that's happened. I think is probably because we've had a bit of compression there. People pulled back with the interest rates. People pulled back because of inflation. We did see that happening towards the middle of last year and towards the end of last year. I think people are now starting to feel a little bit more comfortable that perhaps the economy's getting into a more reliable position.
Yeah. I mean, life goes on at the end of the day, doesn't it? We need to move house, people get married and people die and people get divorced and people have babies and change schools and change jobs. Life goes on and everybody wants to make decisions in life's certain reliable circumstances, but actually the world's not always like that. It's hard. So I've read something recently that said cautious optimism. From what you've just said, that sounds about right.
I think that's a very fair statement. You know, there's so much going on at the moment, you know, and interest rates, inflation. There's a lot of drivers in the market, and people are kind of dipping their toe in the water. They're getting back into things, really. But buyers and sellers have to be sensible, really. This is not a marketplace where we're going to...
Yeah, people are sensitive. They're price sensitive, both on the rents and on the purchase and the sales.
They are, and I think the other interesting thing is we're starting to see investors come back into the marketplace as well, which is a very secret sign that actually people are starting to look more towards the future than necessarily panicking about what's out there today.
Interesting that you say that, because only yesterday I heard two stories of investors buying, and it was the first time I've heard it. Because I was thinking that you know, that market's done, that's over. There are people
out there, and I think because they've had that holdback, which everybody naturally did. We didn't know where things are going. The rental market was tough, and pressures in the housing market. If you're sat there as an investor, you know, you sit and wait till you feel that the green shoots are there. And I think the fact that you've heard of that, we're seeing that on the ground, I think, you know, is certainly a a welcome sign, really.
Last year, you told us that if you knew a sale or letting agent was a qualified member of a professional body maintaining high industry standards, you would choose them over an agent who was not. Well, agents who are members of Property Mark are not only regulated, but qualified too. There are currently over 18,000 members right across the UK, all adhering to a strict code of conduct and membership rules. And that is why we at Move IQ endorse what they do. To find your local agent, look for Property Mark and let them know I sent you.
Let's just go back, if we can, to how polarized the market is, or maybe it's not. Is it very different north, south, east, west? Is it different flats, houses? Is it different prime? Where are we at?
Yeah, I think we do generalise, and actually every area has its own marketplace. I think that's the one thing we forget. We talk about the housing market, but the experience you'll get in the Midlands will be very different to the southwest or the northeast, and the types of buyers you've got will be very different. So, for a lot of people looking, you hear the national headlines, but actually the place to look is what's going on in your local market. What are your local experts telling you is happening on the ground? I mean, we get feedback from our members across the entire UK, and I can show you one polarised view to the other, but actually the middle band that sort of sits there gives us a very sensible gradient as to what's going on. But talk to your local experts. That's the right thing to do.
At the risk of sounding ridiculous, but when they always talk the market up, if somebody goes into their local agent, what's going on? There must be a tendency or temptation for that agent to say, it's hugely busy, or seal bids all over the place.
There is, but I think if you're having somebody who's acting on your behalf, you want them to be a positive person. I mean, let's not forget the whole idea that makes people want to move is the fact that it's a desirability from their point of view, but they also need to have confidence. And the beauty we've got in the UK is our housing market is much more resilient than other areas. Why is it more resilient? Because the good old supply and demand scenarios there, we've got an increase in population, we've got a limited amount of houses, we've been behind the trend on that. So the confidence for people in those marketplaces should be that they know there will be demand for their housing, and that helps us keep the prices at a level which is affordable for people.
So your advice, if somebody's reading the housing indecision, looking at the data, is actually go and see your local Property Mark agent on the high street, talk to them about the local market.
Absolutely. The national figures are a great guidance. They're a
rule of thumb.
But talk to your local property market. They will give you the right level of advice, whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, to help you make sure you're making an informed choice.
Surely if you're a buyer, given that they act for the seller, surely if you're a buyer, they're going to talk it up.
And as you want them to be, because even as a buyer today, if I buy a house today, and we can argue, am I paying £1,000 or £2,000 or £3,000 too much money or too less money? The reality is you're in for the long term. If you don't buy a house today, you've got no equity increase. If you do buy a house today, whether you pay £2,000, £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 too much, or £2,000, £4,000, £5,000 too less, in 15 to 18 years' time, and it will be absolutely irrelevant, what you will have seen is continued capital appreciation. And most people, if you ask them, what did you pay for your house 15 years ago?
They've probably forgotten.
I've got no idea. And if you tried them on price, they'd probably accept it. It's about taking that decision to invest in the property market and get yourself on the property ladder, and understand that the benefits in the property market are long-term, but the UK market is sustainable and resilient.
Yeah, we do live on an island. As you say, we've got an increasing population and we're not building enough houses. So,
we're on target to be the largest, we still talk about Europe, but to be, from population point of view, one of the largest. By 2035, I think we're due to be about 70 million people, which is colossal.
There's a huge number of external influences at play at the moment. We've got inflation, interest rates, employment. We've got an election coming along. We've got international conflict. So there's a lot of sensitivity. Surely that's got to play a part. I mean, we all need to live somewhere and move house and what have you.
Sure, it does, absolutely. And I think everybody looks at that. It all boils down to the majority of people is, what are my commitments every month at the moment? Can I sustain those? If interest rates go up, it doesn't just affect your mortgage, it affects your car, it affects, what you're paying, how much it costs you to borrow. So, when things like interest rates or inflation start to happen, or ironically, as we've seen both at the same time, that does affect people's transactional decisions. It makes them take longer to make it. It makes them more cautious. So yes, we are back to that stage that people will make informed choices, as they absolutely should do. They shouldn't put themselves at massive financial risk. But obviously, our job is to make sure that people aren't putting themselves at risk, but actually making the right choices for them at the right time.
Something I've often talked about is best in breed. If you've got a best in breed 1-bed flat or 2-bed flat or 4-bed family house, whatever it is, the best of its type, then you should be safe. But those are the ones to look for.
They are, absolutely. And there are some fantastic properties out there. I was going to call them gems, effectively, which, we've all been there. You're looking for one type of property, you walk in the door of one, which somebody has done absolutely the way you want it, the location you want it. That to you is worth a premium, and you will find that design, and you will go for that.
And when you come to sell, it will still be worth a premium because it's the best in breed. Whereas if you've chosen something in a bit of a hurry that's a bit compromised, that you might pay less for it, but actually when it comes to sell, it might take longer to sell and you'll get less for it.
Absolutely right. And I think it's the investment, not just the property, it's the investment in yourself that's the key part, really, and your enjoyment while you're living there.
There's a lot of people out there, from what we're hearing, that actually feel excluded from their ability to own their own home, to buy a home. Do you think we will ever see an affordability reset?
A reset, I think, again, is back to the supply and demand of properties. But I think whether we look at sales or we look at lettings, we're still in a situation where it would be nice to think of what are the creative things that we can do to try and help people. If you look at people that are in rented accommodation at the moment, they're often paying more than somebody would be paying their mortgage. So we know that they're managing to do that. And I think, obviously, we did have, a financial market many years ago where, unrealistic lending went out, and that caused a reset in that regard. But it'd be nice to think that we can start looking at more structured products to help those people that could afford to pay the mortgage, but don't necessarily have the big 15 to 20% deposits that they need. That's the challenge. And
there are some more creative ways of helping people nowadays.
There are indeed. They are emerging, and I think I would like to see more of that. I'd like to see more government support to help people get on the ladder in the first place. I mean, obviously, we had Help to Buy, which obviously worked very much in the new home sector, but actually, there is an argument to keep reinforcing the first-time buyer, people in long-term accommodation, to be able to get a permanent roof on.
It's such a vital part of the sort of natural cycle of the market, isn't it? You've got to have first-time buyers. We all need first-time buyers to join the market and let everything else take shape.
We do, and they are statistically starting to continue to get older. Very similar to what we've seen in the rental market, really, or tenants staying in rental properties longer, which does create a bubble, because obviously if you're getting to the stage where you're getting a lot of renters, 45, 55, where do they go when it comes to retirement? They're not necessarily got a house to sell to help fund their care.
That's a big worry.
And that's a worry. Yeah. Absolutely.
No, I'm not that old, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's a worry for society. Yeah. If you're a tenant when you're 65 and you retire, how are you going to pay rent?
There are challenges out there. I think we all do appreciate that. And I just hope that we find more solutions and products out there to help people get on the ladder, really.
Rents, rising, falling. What happened last year? Statistics.
Rents shot up. We saw, you have seen it in the news, 10, 15, 20% in some areas. Rents shot up. And we're seeing that soften at the moment, which I think, is a nice thing. I think people have got to probably the peak of their affordability. So I think that's a good sign, really. We are seeing still high demands, obviously, but local affordabilities tend to sort of set those levels, really.
Finally, if we may, just a few words of advice, top tips. I'm not asking for kind of predictions or forecasts, because I think that's quite difficult at the moment, but top tips for sellers.
Sellers, be realistic, I think. Everybody gets trapped up about what is my house worth, and my house is worth X, Y, and Z. If you're moving, it's never what you buy and sell for, it's the difference between. And I think that's probably the part people need to, if they're moving down market, they may need to release X amount of equity, or if they're looking to move up market, they may have the value of the house plus X amount to invest in addition. And what I would say is, if you're getting offers on the table, take those in mind, add what you've got on top in order to do, and then see what else you can find out there, because people are negotiating at the moment. So, it's a two-way street.
Top tips for buyers.
Buyers, again, you've got more choice now. So you don't have to be panicked. And you've got more products coming to market as banks are starting to ease off on interest rates. Some are coming down in rates, some are going up, as we know. But that market is starting to move. So from a buyer's point of view, you've got more choice. There's plenty of property coming on the market. Don't feel pressurised into buying something that doesn't suit you, really.
Yeah.
Price will always be the driver of that, and the type of accommodation, obviously. But have confidence to go into the market. You're looking at it over a medium to long-term picture.
Negotiation, it's possible. Top tips for renters.
This is an interesting one. So the top tip I would give to renters, and I think this is strange, is look after the property you're in if you are renting. And why am I saying that? Well, a lot of tenancies that are out there at the moment, despite the rises that we've had, a lot of the historic ones are still actually below where the current market rents are. People have been in them for a while.
Yeah.
And a lot of landlords haven't been driving rents up for the sake of it. It's happened because mortgage products have changed. They can't set the interest charges against tax, so now that's directly impacting the charges that they're facing, which makes it unaffordable. And that's why we've seen those come up. The second driver, though, that's been the increase in rent is actually where tenants haven't flagged or don't flag necessarily when there are issues of maintenance. A small job that can be corrected for £50 or £100 all of a sudden ends up being a long persistent water leak that ends up needing a lot of additional work and a lot of expenditure.
Yeah.
And that can then be in a position where you can see the costs, if there's a lot of work to do, landlords having to then pass that back to the tenants by increasing the rents, or in a situation if actually they get it wrong, as happened in a case I've been dealing with recently, it's meant that there's a new bathroom to be going in. But of course, the natural thing for the landlord is, I've now got a new bathroom to fit.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the cost of that, I'm going to need access to the property.
Yeah.
If I give the tenant notice, put a new bathroom in, what's the new rent going to be?
Got it.
And actually, that is one where that started with a water leak under the sink that nobody did anything about.
Yes.
But he now needs a new floor, he needs a bathroom taken.
And that tenant's had to move out.
Tenant's had to move out. New tenant's higher rent, but the tenant that's moved out now has struggled to find something else.
Yeah.
He didn't report it because they couldn't be bothered. So protect the property, communicate with the landlord, and that's more likely to keep you there at an affordable rent.
Nathan, thank you so much. Wise words as always. Much appreciated. Good to see you.
Thank you, Phil.